And he's also part owner, co-founder of Twigged, who are here at Event Tech Live and have a stand just down there. As I said, my name's Katie Moorhen. My company is called 5283. We are communication specialists for the events industry. So welcome to day two. The first session will be delivered in true hybrid style, virtually, by digital and content director Nick Rozier. Nick's going to be talking to us about exploring new worlds, how gamified 3D environments are creating new B2B opportunities. Take it away, Nick.
Director of Two Heads, a global experiential agency, and I'm joined by Nick Rozier, who is our Director of Content and Technology. Hello. So we're here to talk to you this morning about the exciting world of how gamified 3D environments can bring new B2B opportunities. And I think we start with gamified 3D environments. We're really going to talk about how game engines are moving away from the medium of just creating computer games such as Fortnite, Far Cry, etc., and moving into a world where we as creators can use them to take our clients beyond where they're used to going. Now, obviously, we're coming out of the pandemic, and over the last 24 months, the world of virtual has proven a big thing, and game engines have helped us move beyond that. But even before any of us had heard the name COVID, this idea of using the game engine environment to generate new opportunities is something that we at Two Heads had already started working on, and throughout the world of creativity, this was an area that is starting to become very, very big. So Nick and I will talk to you this morning about what is a game engine, how it's changing the world of creativity, how we are using it to help some of our clients, and how other creators are using it to generate some exciting content. This has been amplified over the last 18 months due to the lack of live events for obvious reasons, and we've been able to take our clients and show them how they can use the 3D environments that are created within these gaming engines to generate true connection. Not just sharing videos, not just sharing still images, but to actually be able to immerse their customers in their product, in their video output, in their content, and how these gaming engines allow us to create virtual worlds that will take us beyond what you can demonstrate in the real world. Now, as the world starts to open up again, you would imagine that this is immediately going to be put on the back foot because suddenly people can go and meet face to face, but it's not going to work exactly like that. Gaming engines have allowed us to take product demonstrations, to take immersive environments, to take interaction with customers to a different level, one that we can't recreate in the real world. And it's important that we maintain this going forward and not just ignore the lessons of the last 18 months. The rush to sustainability is going to make people more selective about what you do, about moving your product around the world, about gathering people in large environments. We're going to have to be more choosing about how and when we do that. And this is where gaming environments will allow us to create hybrid solutions, which are a combination of being there physically and being there virtually, and allow us to sell in a different way.
All right, so for people over there in the audience and online, to give a bit of context, who are Two Heads? Where have we come from and what are we doing now?
Well, Nick, that's a good question. Hopefully most people know who we are, but for those of you who don't, Two Heads was founded 35 years ago, and we have come up through the world of trade shows. But we made a decision about 20 years ago to try and expand beyond that. So we started concentrating more not about how a brand can just sell, but how a brand can create an experience that truly reflects their knowledge, their brand identity, their ideals, so that they can immerse their customers more. So about 20 years ago, we made the decision to move away from just predominantly looking at trade shows and how we can get people and move away from the logistical side of what you do, to start helping brands consider how an experience is something that represents your ideals, it represents your product range, it represents how you want your customers to reflect upon you. And this idea of experience takes, a brand from being more than just a supplier of something or, something you go to trade with. They become an aspirational thing, a company that you want to deal with because you share in their ideals or you share in their view of the world. We're now a company that have offices around the world, and we take brands to all 5 continents, a regular basis, and we help them engage with their customers. This is not just about taking a product going from A to B. We organise parties, we organise product launches, we organise customer events. This is about how you true engagement out there.
And so to do all those different things, the key is you've got to stay on trend, and you've got to keep up with the pace of change, not only in how things are communicated, but in the technologies we're using to do those things, right?
Yeah, I think it's important that you have to keep a full marketing mix. Obviously, the events of the last 18 months have pushed many people towards virtual. But the virtual world is something that Twohead started playing with 20 years ago. We hosted our first online event in 1999, just prior to the height of the dot-com boom. And we've always tried to make use of technology to make the event space run a lot smoother. Now, we create technology that's bespoke to us and to our clients. So that technology can be helping you engage in the live environment or helping you engage in the virtual environment. And the future now is how we can see the combination of those two working together. We think it's quite important that people understand that the payoff needs to be there, whether you're engaged in somebody virtually, whether you're engaging with them live. There has to be something that you get from both sides of the equation, and that's going to be important for us going forward. And thus our exploration of what game engines and gaming technology can do, because this has been the perception that this is something like Fortnite or something for children or for gamers to play with, but the power that these technologies have brought to us, as I know you know, as the head of digital at Twoheads, allows us to help customers engage in ways that they haven't considered before. And it actually doesn't just replace the live environment, it actually enhances. It allows you to do things and recreate and give demonstrations that you haven't been able to give live for all those years. But Nick, we're talking about the world of gaming technologies. I think it would actually be useful if you could just expand on what do we mean by game engines? Why are they important in the business world?
Cool. Okay, it's a good question. It's this term that gets bandied out a lot. What are they actually used for? What can they build? So we started here with a bit of a demo. It's just been Halloween. We're a few days after, but pumpkins are still in the air. And so we're going to show you a bit of a game that was created by one of our team here at Twohead, Sam, who heads up the IT and innovation side of the team. And just to give you an idea of how these things can be used to create immersive experiences and to engage people even sort of around the world in different places at the same time. So this is a game called Dead Ends, and it's essentially a sort of online game of tag through this kind of post-apocalyptic cityscape. So it's a bit of fun, really. And there's a few key things about this which are really interesting as we sort of watch this. Number one, this was created really rapidly. The great thing about game engines is that you can actually create a full sort of beginning to end experience in a matter of days now, compared to what would have taken you sort of weeks or months with a massive team before. So they really democratize access to the sort of technology, level of quality you can get, and the sort of 3D environments that before were only the domain of game studios or films. So that's really exciting. And number two, this is not just a game that you have to download and play on your computer. You could simply scan a QR code and load this onto any device, your phone, your tablet, your desktop computer if you wanted to, and have exactly the same experience and exactly the same quality. So none of this stuff is, hours of download. In the events industry as well, it's always a challenge around internet speed. Do you have bandwidth enough space? Are you able to give people the content and serve that to them easily? And so what this allows us to do now is push really immersive, engaging content to people with really low wait times. So that's really interesting as well.
And Nick, how would you use something like this? How does this benefit the brand, the ability to generate these environments and do something quickly?
That's a great question. So, obviously, Dead Ends is a bit of fun. It's a Halloween game. It's a bit of a sort of crowd engagement experience at most, But the principles there really, from a sort of gamification perspective, apply through to B2B experiences for brands. What are we trying to do? We're trying to communicate in interesting ways. We're trying to get people to watch and listen to what we're doing. we're trying to help brands talk about their products and their services in interesting and new ways. And so this idea of, immersive 3D spaces, experiences with like a gamified nature is really sort of kind of in vogue, I suppose, at the minute. When you look at companies like Facebook rebranding the sort of group company to Meta, there's a lot of talk around the metaverse,
You raise an interesting point there with Facebook, because people are looking at these things and these environments that you can recreate, and they're looking at the financial muscle of Facebook, and they're imagining that it's quite expensive and quite in depth to try and pull this together. So what's been our experience in trying to work out, trying to get people into these immersive environments? Does it require hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds to recreate what you're trying to put together? Or is it something that we can make use of quick and simple techniques to engage more?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, fundamentally, no, it doesn't cost a lot anymore. Tools like Unity or Unreal Engine, which are a couple of the most widely used game engines out there, have really democratized access not just to the technology, but also to the assets which build these spaces and build these experiences. So on the tech side, you don't need developers anymore to build your experiences. You have drag and drop interfaces, there's really friendly UI there, so for production teams, you don't need to be a sort of coder with 20 years experience to build things. You can just have someone pick it up over the course of weeks, and then create fully fledged experiences. And that's so powerful, because the cost then dramatically drops. And then on the asset side, one of the big limiting factors always of creating immersive kind of 3D spaces or 3D experiences is going to be, all right, we've got this capability to build this space, but what are we going to put in there? Where are our chairs going to come from? Where are our walls going to come from? Where are our characters going to come from? And so what is accessible now is these huge online repositories of low cost or even free assets, which you can use to populate these spaces really rapidly and rapidly prototype out different experiences. So for example, we do a lot of work in the media sector, and so at the sort of onset of our sort of virtual journey of 2020 and 2021, we started building some demo spaces to say, right, how can we take a scene out of a TV show or a film and recreate that so that it can be explored by customers or explored by sales teams, so they can really sell that media content more effectively and put people inside the world. And you take a scene from Mad Men, for example, or you create a bar scene from another piece of content, and we were able to create those not in weeks and weeks of work with modelers and designers and art directors, but it took one person about 3 or 4 days to put one of these scenes together. So, the potential there is absolutely massive.
You raise an interesting point, because I think as we are speaking virtually to the audience here today, we've all become very used to having to attend a number of virtual events over the last 18 months. And one of the things that we found with those virtual events was it was predominantly seemed to be based around the format of the conference. So you will join and you attend a platform, click on a link, watch a live stream of talking heads just like you and I, and possibly click on a few of the video links. And the experience wasn't really there. We weren't able to create that sense of immersive nature.
It's like Zoom Plus, right?
Exactly, like Zoom Plus. And we'll go through some of the case studies, I think, in a few minutes, but we've been looking at how we can use gaming technology to actually make going online something worthwhile. It's about trying to demonstrate a product, trying to immerse yourself in that TV show that you're talking about. And it was really about how some of the change in technology and some of the explorations allow us to not just recreate a virtual exhibition stand that people walk around and look at, but to actually, I think the exhibition stand whole thing has been a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, when we create them as part of our portfolio too,
yeah.
But it's about trying to engage in a different way, engage via a product, engage via something you're selling, engage via the environment of the software, and to get people immersed in what the message about. And I know that's one area that we've been looking at within our technology and our own platform, about how we can use that to recreate.
Yeah.
Should we go through some of these examples now of where this would work?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and before we do, just to jump on that point, I think that's so true. We started the process of looking at virtual experiences like, how can we recreate the physical experience as good as in the virtual space? And we were looking for this magic bullet, like, is it technology? Is it how we're talking to people? Is it the two-way engagement? It's all of those things. And what we realized is there is no magic bullet. And we're asking the wrong question. We're not trying to recreate the physical experience in the virtual world, because we're just not there yet. But I think what we realized is there's things you can do in the virtual world which you just can't do in the physical world. And those are the things we should focus on, you know. And so I think maybe in the aerospace industry, there's some good examples there to sort of jump off on.
Nick, thank you very much. Yes, we have been talking in aerospace. And I think this is a very, very good example about how we work with some of our clients and how we've used them for virtual, not just to replace what they've had or what they were missing when the pandemic hit, but to actually enhance the offering to take them further beyond. So what we'll bring up on screen now is this is a recreation of an aircraft that would be something that Two Heads are very well used to demonstrating. As you know, we handle actual fleets and mock-up fleets around the world and get customers on board business aircraft in order to be able to demonstrate to them. But one of the areas that we've always been aware of is when you put somebody in a business aircraft when it's on the ground at a product viewing, you only get to see it in that one static location. You don't get what it feels like to be in the air. And more importantly, like all environments, business aircraft have different functions. So by working here in the virtual environment, we can demonstrate how the aircraft is set if you want to show it when people are using it to sleep, how it's set when people are using it to dine, how it's set when people are using it for business opportunities.
And the key is you can do that instantly, right? Whereas in the real world, it takes longer.
Yes. Now, you've always been able to do that through the world of 3D animation and be able to show individual clips. But that's always been more about showing something when somebody's not immersive. Now, when you're involved in a sales conversation, you want to be able to react to what people say. And the whole thing takes place on a non-linear basis. And that's where game engines allow us to enhance the conversation. Because we can listen, I can tell you something. And when you ask a question, I can then say, well, let me demonstrate that to you. And I can react in real time to what you do. So I don't have to say, just wait another 3 minutes and it'll be on in this bit of the animation. I can take you to any location on the aircraft and I can show you any portion of it. Now, the other thing that allows us to do is to visualize things that previously you've only been asked to imagine. So within the world of business aviation, legroom is as important as it is for those of us who get on board commercial flights on a day-to-day basis. So certain manufacturers will talk about how much more legroom they can recreate. Now, if I say to you, you have 6 inches or 12 centimeters more legroom, that doesn't mean an awful lot to you. It doesn't allow you to imagine it. But in the world of the virtual environment, we can adjust immediately and put seats closer together to show you that this is what that makes. Mm-hmm. One of the things that one of our clients talks about is how they made a window 80% larger. So we can demonstrate.
What is 80%? Yeah. Right? That's so ambiguous.
So we can demonstrate to you by changing the environment. We can even compare and contrast how one environment works with the other, with their competitor's environment. Because it's not just important how large your window is, it's how many windows you have, how much natural light gets into the cabin. And because we're recreating these things virtually using ray tracing and other technologies, we're not making false exaggerations or lighting things in a real way. We can demonstrate to you what it means to have less glass, more space, different environments, what it's like at night, what it's like during the day, what it's like at 40,000 feet, what it's like on the ground. Mm. And the other remarkable thing is we can make everything work as it would in reality. So if there's an iPad interface I want to demonstrate and how it works and how I can engage with my product, that's all recreated. It's not something you're imagining. You can pick up the iPad, you can press the buttons, and the environment around you will change exactly as it would in the real world. It's highly, highly unlikely anybody would ever put you on a $75 million aircraft and give you access to play with it as you see fit. But in the virtual world, you can do with what you want. You can change it as you will. Now, previously, all of this has been available in 3D, but the actual ability to create something that's non-linear, that you can engage with as you want, and you can interact with it as you would in the real world. That's what gamification of game engines is bringing to the B2B world. So Nick, I've just talked passionately about how you can use it to demonstrate a product in quite an extreme case, a $75 million aircraft. But, you know, how would companies that don't manufacture, what else can we use these environments for?
It's a good question. And, you know, when you don't have a physical product, which is your hero to kind of talk about, you know, it might not be as obvious immediately how game engines could be useful. But there's a couple of examples, and I think this leads us into the world of customer experience centers. So, you know, last year we worked heavily with Vodafone on their customer experience center in the UK, and this year now with Belden, who are a sort of global sort of network infrastructure and hardware provider on their customer experience centers. And these are physical spaces in the real world, but actually what we found is there's a massive case to be made for having a virtual sort of digital twin version of these spaces so that you can dramatically increase the scope of how many people are using these, who's using them, and geographically you take all the brakes off in terms of where people can kind of experience these. So you've got these really expensive spaces, often they're outside of the center of cities because, you know, the real estate's cheaper. So to get people to go there often is quite a high bar to pass. The minute you put it online on a link on a virtual platform, like the VX platform, for example, you really take all those barriers away. So I can have a space in the UK or anywhere in the world, and anyone in the world can come visit it anytime. You know, I can have sales teams in different global regions using them throughout the day on a 24/7 basis. So, you know, immediately it massively opens up the abilities to use these spaces and to talk about your brand in that really engaging way that customer experience centers allow you.
Within that, I mean, I mentioned the aircraft you can enjoy. Customer experience centers aren't static locations. They're not something that's entirely, you know, it's just based upon the look and feel of the architecture. So does the game environment allow you to do more with it? I mean, how do you interact with it?
Yeah, it does. You know, what we've kind of discovered and what are sort of basic tenets of our kind of experience design philosophy or whatever you want to call it is, the more different types of interaction you can have throughout any kind of sales engagement, any kind of B2B engagement, the more engaged people are going to be. It sounds obvious, but, you know, going back to your earlier example about virtual events, if people are just sat watching a live stream or just sat in a video call, after 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you're bored. You know, you've seen it, you've done it. So the more different moments you can put into that journey, the more people are going to be engaged, their brains are taking over, processing this new way of kind of communicating, and so they're going to listen more, and they're going to talk back more, and you have a two-way conversation rather than just a one-way. And so that's where we can sort of bring that sort of level of engagement to these virtual customer experiences too. You can have a physical audience sat in, you know, a broadcast room in a center. You can combine that with the virtual audience kind of dialing in over a VC system. Then for both of those groups, you can have physical touchscreens in the space, but you can also replicate that touchscreen experience in a sort of app on the sort of virtual CEC itself as well. So you can kind of have an equal share of engagement and interaction, both physically and virtually, and then have those two groups interacting together as well. And then, you know, more sort of expensive experiences like VR headsets, you know, which you have in the physical world. Again, with game engines, you can replicate that in a web browser these days, without the big downloads, as we mentioned before, without the sort of gigabytes and minutes of load times. It can be instantaneously sort of served to your people. So you're kind of, again, taking more and more barriers away, taking more and more limits, which typically have been cost, to make this much more accessible and much more sort of, you know, wide-reaching, I suppose.
Now, we've talked about how we can use game engines to immerse clients in, but I know that when you launched one of our physical CEC earlier in the year, we had some of the challenges of trying to place individuals who were stuck with travel, where they wanted to do the launch from their live environment, but they found themselves stuck in varying parts of the world, and the pandemic was preventing them from getting from A to B. How did we use the game engine technology there to recreate a physical launch as we normally would, but do it all virtually?
Yeah, that was a fun example. This is again for Belden, so to kind of introduce the space, to get people internally, to get investors excited about it. They wanted this launch event, And we were going to go and simply shoot them in the space and have them do presentations and talk through the physical space itself. Obviously, we couldn't do that because of travel restrictions. So having this 3D version of a space, but not just in a 3D software, like a standard sort of traditional 3D software, but in a game engine, allowed us to, in real time, and that's the key, create these kind of photorealistic walkthroughs and photorealistic sort of sequences and backgrounds from which our presenters can talk, from which we could cut together promotional videos for the space and create this really sort of comprehensive broadcast explaining every sort of feature. And that real-time aspect was so key. So if you look at the world of architecture, yeah, photorealistic visualization's been around for decades. It's not a new thing. But typically those frames, you would go to a specialist agency who was dedicated to doing high-end visualization. They would charge you, thousands of pounds for every minute of footage. And it would take a really long time. You're talking about like 2-3 minutes per frame, 25 frames a second. It can be prohibitive. So what the real-time aspect of game engines allows us to do is, with the same level of quality, that same photorealistic look, you can run your simulation, your visualization at 60, 120 frames a second. So you can live almost push a virtual camera through the space as a cameraman would. And you can really quickly test different shots, test locations, test different lighting conditions. Physically moving a sun and sky around to kind of see, okay, what's it going to look like at night time? What's it going to look like at daytime? Can I do a time lapse? So all of those things suddenly are at the tip of your fingertips with, minutes of prep time rather than the sort of days you would need for a shoot or the hours you would need for a 3D software typically.
Now, you mentioned photorealism a couple of times in that last statement. Now, there are going to be some people out here who are going to be skeptical as to what level of photorealism we can achieve in a game engine, because they've seen their children play Fortnite or they've looked at other games online on the Xbox, and these worlds don't look real. How close can we achieve?
I think this could be a good time for an impromptu demo. So I'm picturing the footage we're going to show here.
Okay.
But we could put two bits of footage side by side, right? Or even 3 bits of footage. One would be the interior of an aircraft filmed with a camera. One would be interior of an aircraft rendered as a sort of video. And one would be the interior in real time done through a game engine. And we've got a really big screen here at Event Tech Live, so people in the audience have a look. But the quality difference between all 3 of those these days, to be honest, is pretty imperceptible, And you may even think that the 3D and the game engine footage look better than the real life shot stuff, because you can have much more latitude when you're doing stuff in 3D. So if it's that correctly, there really is no difference these days in quality.
Nick, you've mentioned a few times about how these environments can now be made instantaneously available. Now, in the past, we've needed powerful hardware or software or large disks to be exchanged in order to create the environment. So what's changed in there?
It's a good question, and that's another sort of technology change, I suppose, in the past sort of 3-4 years. So there's this new technology called pixel streaming. It's called various things, but that's one of the names it goes by. And it's sort of in beta mode at the minute, but it's very available to use. And what pixel streaming allows us to do is, in the cloud, we actually host copies of our application, our environment, or our sort of game experience. And then all the processing and all the sort of loading of that scene, all the real-time rendering of that scene happens on these powerful machines in the cloud. And then as a user, as an end user, I can then use any device to connect in. And all I'm receiving is a video feed done. So essentially, it turns what would be sort of gigabytes of download, loads of load time, really powerful machine on your desk, into equivalent of a stream from YouTube in terms of the bandwidth required. And what it also allows me to do is still send commands back, so I'm interacting. And the latency now on decent connections, but even 4G, is so low that there's no perceived lag. So when I'm putting inputs in, if I'm doing keyboard commands, if I'm moving my mouse, there's no perceived lag in that experience, and I can interact as if the game is running locally. And that's really powerful. So it does allow you to run, something like Dead Ends the game, but the customer experience centers, the aircraft we talked about, even on a mobile device. You know, any mobile phone that can run YouTube can run a pixel-streamed game engine experience. And there's another aspect of this which is really important, and that's the security aspect. So before, if you wanted to, you know, say, create one of these experiences, you might actually create an application, and you might put it on the App Store, and you might sort of load it onto devices. And when you're actually dealing with products which are proprietary, you know, for example, aircraft, that's a massive, massive security issue, because you're essentially giving every user a 3D model of the product, which in some cases is really high fidelity. And that's a really valuable asset. So if someone wants to reverse engineer your application, they can just grab that 3D model and run away with it and do what they want with it. So there's a massive security implication there. Again, because all you're receiving from the cloud in a pixel stream game engine experience is a video feed, there is no transfer of 3D models, there's no transfer of confidential files, nothing is saved onto the device. So it's far, far, far more efficient, but also far more secure.
Nick, that's a great example of pixel streaming you've just gone through. Is there anything we can do to demonstrate that to the audience here today?
Yeah, so if we think back to Dead Ends, the game where we sort of talked about at the beginning of the session, if you hit the QR code, which is going to pop up on the screen anytime, get your mobile phones out, scan that, you should be able to log into Dead Ends, hit the play button when you get to the page, type your name in and press start, and you can play the game too. And so, depending on how good your 4G is, you should have no issues there. But yeah, have a go.
So Nick, thank you very much for your time today. I think we've covered off an awful lot of the game engines. We've demonstrated how the technology works, how it's more accessible than it previously was. It's certainly a lot less expensive, I think, than people would have expected. And the results can be quite startling. You can do a lot more. And as you said, it's more than just, you know, something that people used to play games on these days. It's the name almost belies what it is. It's a very, very powerful tools to create virtual environments. Now, if anybody here in the audience wants to get in touch with your digital team, how will they go about doing that?
Well, we're exhibiting here at EventTech Live in the virtual booth, selling V8. If you head over to the website, go visit us. A couple of the guys will be there answering messages and setting meetings up. So please do come and chat. And otherwise, we're always available at hello@twoheads.com, which should appear as well in the middle of the screen here. And thank you, for bearing with us. Sorry we're not there in person, but it's been fun, hopefully a bit informative. And yeah, that's it from me.
Yeah, and that's it from us at Two Heads. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time this morning. Enjoy the rest of the show.